Okay, this is the tutorial on how to make a shoebox garage for the models you can build in Maya, specifically the vehicle assignment. So what we want to do is we want to go to a website or a place that gives us the blueprints for the model we're going to build, because this exercise is specifically coming using reference of an architectural rendering style orthographic front, side, and top for the to make sure that all the major points and geometric descriptors of your choice of vehicle can be met in every view. So the first thing you want to do is go to a website that has blueprints, and the common one I use is the hyphen blueprints, and it'll take you here, and I've already loaded it up. And once you're on this site, you can just start clicking around. Click around the Cadillac XT5, and this is a pretty good image right here. Now the reason I say that this is a pretty good image is because it actually has the things we're looking for, which is 4 views, side, front, back, and top. And secondly, it's all in silhouette. There's not a lot of color. Now the problem is it also has these dark areas, and really what you optimally want is that you want to have something that's completely in silhouette, kind of a pure vector drawing. So I would gravitate less towards any of these that had shades, these gray shades or actual color. And the reason is you're going to be reading these into Maya as blueprints and then modeling over them. And this dark gray will very quickly, or even this light gray, hide your wireframes, which you want to see as you build over these blueprint templates. So gravitate more towards things that are simple line drawings with a minimum or no gray or black shading or colored shading on it. So the other thing I would like people to do is keep your designs fairly boxy. You don't actually want to have something that's very ornate or very have kind of those 1930s mobster hubcaps and firewalls with the curvature over the wheels, because this is going to be one of the first vehicle assignments, modeling assignments from blueprints that you have. So take it easy on yourself, and remember that this is not the last model you're going to build. This is just the first vehicle model you're going to be building. So you know, obviously this runs the gamut of science fiction, fictional vehicles to realistic vehicles. Try to aim more towards realistic vehicles, because the other half of this assignment is going to be to texture it. And to texture something that is fictional, you're really going to be looking around for, you're going to be desperate for textures, versus if you start modeling a vehicle that exists in the real world, you simply have to look up the name of it, and you'll be just fine, because there's going to be dozens of images of the actual thing, and you can pull those for your textures. So if I'm going to be looking up something fairly blocky, I'm going to look at Datsuns, because why not? When you click on any car, you are taken then to this view, and these columns here let you know that for this particular car, here's the name of it, this has the front, top, right, and side view. Front, top, rear, and side view. And you also get a nice view of how big that image is. You're going to want the biggest possible. Vectors are nice because they are pure line, and you also will know the name of your particular vehicle. Take note of that. Definitely take note of that, because you're going to be looking up that particular car, as I said, for the textures. And you don't want another car, you don't want something that looks like it. You want to actually have that particular car. So I'm going to gravitate toward this Datsun, which looks particularly boxy. And from here I can right click on it and just choose, and I'm using Firefox. I'm going to right click and say View Image, and then I'm going to Save Image As, and then I'm just going to save it to my desktop. Now from the desktop, what I recommend you do is actually go in and create a folder and name it the vehicle you are choosing to do. I'm modeling a Daihatsu 1600 510. And then inside of your new folder, you can drag your saved image. And I like to rename things because it's going to start getting pretty complicated to look things up, and then you're going to have dozens of different images. You're going to have a lot of different things going on. It really makes sense to clean this up and try to organize as soon as you can. So what we're going to do with this full image, again, it's just this car here, is we're going to be cutting up each of these different views into separate images, because we're going to read them in one at a time onto different planes in Maya and use that to do your modeling. The way you can do this is you can actually open up the web browser of your choice and go to a site, pixlr.com, pixlr.com. And Pixlr is a online Photoshop clone. And if you go to the Pixlr editor, that's the one you want. I think there's like Pixlr Today and Pixlr Romat. Just use the Pixlr editor, and then it'll bug you to run Adobe Flash. Allow, remember this decision, whatever. Take my money. So here we are. Open image from computer, and I've got the Daihatsu here. There we are. So in Pixlr, and I will do a little, if you do not use Pixlr, if you want to use Photoshop, that's fine as well. I do have other tutorials kind of jumping between the use of Pixlr and Photoshop, since some like to use one thing, others like to use another. But I'm going to just, for the purpose of this tutorial, use this free web version because it's available quite literally to everyone at any time. Mac, PC, what have you. So what I'm going to be doing is a little trick here in Pixlr. I'm going to click on the crop tool, which is the upmost leftmost tool, and when I run my cursor over it, it pops up and reminds me what it is. Be very careful when you use these commands. You do not default to the commands up here in your web browser, because people have made that mistake and then they've closed this tab in their web browser and everything is gone. There is no, whoops, I made a mistake. Let me just go back to that tab. So I use a little trick. I click on the crop tool, not this marquee, but the crop tool, and I draw very carefully a square around the car, and I give it a little kind of distance on each side. I don't want to crop it too close. And then I just press the enter key, and it will automatically crop that to a side view. And from here, I want to save. Remember, it's the inside menu file here, not the file drop-down menu in your browser. But save, and then click on my computer. Make sure that you've got a JPEG, and in this case, I'm going to name it not Daihatsu Full, but Daihatsu Side. And then I just saved that folder. And so here's my trick. Once it's done and it gives me that image, I just come up here to edit and I go to undo. I now have my full image again, and I'm allowed to quickly cut and paste and do the same process for saving all of the three other sides I have left to do. So Daihatsu front, and then undo. And again, it's important to try and give it white space on all the sides, because you're going to be putting this on a polygon. And I name it Daihatsu Top. Okay, Daihatsu Top. And you want to save enough room all around your image so that you are so that the pixels of the drawn image do not get confused with your wireframe edges, your 3D model edges, because you're going to be putting these, as I said, on to polygons, and it's going to be very easy to start confusing a drawn black line with the black line of your 3D model. So now I've saved out all the different images, and I can just close this. I don't really need to do too much. But in my folder now, since I'm using a PC, this should be pretty easy. I know that in the Macintosh, you've got the ability to click on Show Info, and I think in the PC here they have the same thing with Properties. And in this case, I want to go for the actual size of this thing. So Details. Here's my size, 248 by 104 for the top view. Well, what about side view? Let's just take a look at side for the time being. So you want to get the dimensions of these images, 243 by 93. All right, fine. 243 by 93. I'll just put this to the side, and what I now want to do is I'm going to just poke that over so I've got a little tab to kind of pop it on top of Maya. I now have the dimensions of the first plane that I want to create. So come into Polygon, Create, Polygon Primitives, pop down here to Plane, go to the options for plane. You do not want the default setup of 1 by 1 by 10 by 10. You do not need all this noise here in the grid. See, that's the grid we're going to be using now, and it's frankly just got all kinds of lines running through it that we just don't need. This is going to be a real headache for you to kind of look through. You want the clearest pane of glass possible, so make sure that the numbers you're using are 1 by 1 width and height, but also 1 by 1 width and dimension divisions and height divisions. Apply that. Now we've got the same sized pane of glass, only we don't have any markings through it that are going to be confusing for our eye. So the exercise now is to create a, under rendering editors, bring in your hypershade, create a shader for this particular object. And you do so by coming down to your shader list here, click on Mr. Lambert. And when you double click it, you get the options for it. Immediately name this. So car side shader with the occasional camel case. So car side shader, and rename the mesh as well to car underscore side underscore mesh. And we have now a beautiful correlation between the shader that we've named and the mesh we've named. Double click the shader again, and instead of giving, well, you can give it a little color. You know that trick where you've kind of like, I'm going to put blue on it so that I know when I've accurately dropped it onto the mesh. And from here I'm going to go in and grab the model. In fact, let's just bring up the outliner for clarity. So I've got car side mesh, I've got car side shader, and with this selected, I right click on the shader and I can assign the material to the selection. It's just popped blue. I'm going to hit undo and show you another way to do the same operation, which is that you can middle mouse click on this. You see that plus sign? That means I grabbed it, and I'm going to drag it over and just drop it. Boom, same thing. All right, that validates that we've got the right shader on the right mesh. You don't need to do this. It's just a little operation you can do for verification. But the real step in this that we want to do is we want to click on the checkerboard Ralston Purina sign here on the far left for the color, and it takes us to this option in Maya which allows us to read in an image. And in this case we want to just click on File. It's the icon here that has mountains and a sun. Click on File. It got rid of the color because it's no longer accessing the color. You've asked it to connect it to an image, and it takes you to the folder where you are going to find that image, and go to your desktop and then go to your specific folder that you were looking for and read in the image you would like. So this, of course, should read the image. I'm not yet in the mode that Maya provides to see that image. You have to remember that the keystrokes 4 is for wireframe only, 5 is for hard shaded, and 6 shows the texture. Well, this is nice. We got the texture successfully on, but this looks terrible. As you might see, it looks like a cartoon because it does not yet have the proportions on this plane that would match the proportions of the image that I am reading in. So I'm going to read this in again, since I cleverly got rid of the window by mistake. And looking here under details, 243 by 93. Well, obviously 243 is the length. So I'm going to go in here to Maya and just hit my scaling tool. Now I have these scaly bits here, and as I move them back and forth, you can see that the X is the one I need to stretch out to be the longest side. The longest side here is 243. So 243 by 93, I could type in 243, but I don't want to, because I don't want this thing going monstrously wrong. So 2.43 instead. And that'll give me a nice nice proportion. Looks pretty good, because the next proportion, 93, is pretty close to 1. 0.93 is pretty close to 1. But I want to make sure I'm doing it in the proper direction, because I could type it in the wrong axis for this up axis, and this is completely arbitrary how big this is, because it's planar. So we'll just keep that 1. However, by doing that, I've validated that the only one left by process of reduction. I know that scale Z is the next one that I need to modify, and that will be 0.93. And now we have the perfect proportions for this image. And I want to immediately create a layer from that selected. Double click the layer name, and we come in and car underscore side underscore layer. You can see that all the suffixes that I'm providing for each thing, whether it's the shader, whether it's the mesh, or whether it's the layer, actually has the name of it at the very end, because car side, car side, car side, it gets confusing. Just name these things what they are: the layer, the mesh, and the shader. Next thing I want to do is I want to rotate this up 90 degrees like so. I can see that that's the rotate X, so I simply go in here after moving it a bit to orient which axis am I moving. X is the side I'm moving. Type in 90, boom. And then move on and basically make 3 more versions of this using each side. So pause this video while I do the same, because I think it's going to be pretty tedious to just watch me go through it. And I will start the video again when everybody else gets up to speed. Pause here. Okay, resume. I have created 4 different meshes, 3 new ones since I paused. All of them named side, top, front, back. And for the meshes, I've also done the same for the shaders, created corresponding shaders named exactly what they should be to be affixed to the mesh with the same name. And also I've simply read in the front, side, top, etc., and given each its own layer. And this helps because if you click the visibility for each of the layers, you should be able to turn off and on just the ones you currently need. Also remember that when you start modeling, the last thing you want to have is Maya continually select this template. So let's get in the habit of clicking the furthest rightmost box in the layers until it reads R, which is reference, which means that you cannot select it, but it is still visible with its textures. If you click it once, it turns into a T, and that means template, and it does not mean, it means you're not able to see any of the textures. So just keep clicking until it says R and you're good to go. If you want to select these things, of course, just bring up the outliner, because we are going to be selecting and then scaling. And here's the process we're going to be using. The only 2 templates we need to have visible right now will be the top and the side layers. So just turn off the other ones, and let's make this so that you can grab the top mesh. I'm going to come in kind of close here, because we don't really have a consistent size. Now we've sized each of these meshes proportional to the image, but there is no correlation between all of these that they are now an absolutely perfect size as we need it to be. And if you want to check your settings, make sure that you come into Windows, Settings, Preferences, and you can go into Preferences. I just used this other hotkey, which is the man running away from a gear or a hot sun, and it comes up with preferences as well. On the left column, you've got settings, and you want to go to whatever you are currently modeling in. I like to use foot, and because I'm an animator, always 30 frames per second. Then I press save, and I want the display for the grid. Pop that open, and I type in 1011 because that means the grid itself is now each of these gray boxes, which may not be showing up very well in the video, but the gray boxes, there's a matrix of 10 by 10 grids on each of these 4 quadrants, is 1 foot. And that's going to get more important as you get into modeling things that should be at the right size. So we can grab all these templates, group them, and then just scale them all up until it's about the size that you need the car to be. Because it's good to get in the habit of just scaling things up until they are pretty much the size you need them to be. You may not get the coordinates for how big something is in what you're modeling. We can make sort of a guesstimate at this point where this is, if these 2 squares are 2 feet, then I need to scale this up a lot more. And it's about 4 feet across. That's a pretty tiny car. I'm going to go even higher. That's about 6-foot person, maybe not. So there we are. I'm just going to kind of scale this at about 7 feet. If I had information about the car and I went in and took a look at it and said, oh, this is an X sized car, then I would just then I would make sure to scale it to that size. So with everything selected now, you can come up to Edit and Unparent. You want to make sure that your default settings are there and hit Apply. And what it's going to do is it's going to unparent it from the group. You can now select the group in the outliner, press Delete. And each of these has been sized up quite a bit because we've added 100 to it, but none of that paint is yours, which is nice. And now we're going to go into the process of making sure that these are scaled commensurate to each other. So with the top mesh, I'm going to start floating it down until it bisects the side. And what this allows me to do is kind of check, do the outermost parts of this image fit? And if not, then I need to scale the thing as a whole. And this is actually, strangely enough, pretty good job. You can see where I'm lining up the line of the window here, the windshield. And the bumper, you could say, look at that, it's not quite big, it's not quite the length it needs to be here in this black bumper, but in fact it is, because the topology of the front of the car, the bumper actually pokes out here at the bottom, and that's what you need to sort of measure it against. That's pretty good. If you take a look, there's actually a bit of a knob here on either side of the bumper, so what you're really lining up are these 2 images, and they look pretty good. Don't get too worried about pixel perfect precision. The job here is to approximate the geometry and not to try and drive yourself crazy with pixel perfection, because you know, people may have made slight mistakes when they did these, and you're not really looking to become too don't be too precious about it, because that'll stymie you. All I'm caring to do is to line up kind of the beginning line of the windshield, which looks pretty good, and the end point of the windshield, which also looks pretty good, and do the same with the back of the windshield. Yeah, that all checks out. Wonderful. So that's the size I need it to be. If I did need to size it, I would. I'm choosing one thing to keep constant. In this case, I'm keeping car side mesh constant, and when I make the other parts of this appear, I'm going to size them, not the side. The side is my measuring stick. So car front, I can move that over and turn it 90 degrees. And I can turn it actually -90 so that the polygon, the normal's facing out. And drag it back. In fact, let's get rid of the back layer so we can just see what we want. All right, it needs a little alignment. Just push it down. Looks all right. I'm just gauging the top of the car at this point. Now I'm going to line up the tires. Make sure it touches the lowest point in each case. I could probably use a little pushing up. So I'm assuming it just needs translation right now, but if it needed scaling, I would do the same, but I would be very careful to not do any scaling along any axis, but instead do uniform scaling. Because again, these meshes are proportional to the image. If you scale them in any direction like that, you've actually thrown it off. That's going to affect you later when you try to model it. Things will not line up. It's very frustrating. So that looks pretty good. I'm just going to put it over here at the front of the car and make it disappear. And now I'm going to go to the back and grab that, turn it 90 degrees, and kind of shove it into the side view. That looks like it's a little bit off. And want to line up the tires. All right, that's actually lining up nicely. Now, one of the tricks you can use if you want to size things is you can actually manipulate the pivot point by, on a PC, pressing the insert key. And for the duration you're holding down the insert key, you're manipulating just the pivot point of that object. If you combine it with holding down the vertex snap key, which is V, then I will snap this to its own corner. And what that allows me to do when I go back to the scale tool is when I scale, it scales up from the bottom. So you see it grows and shrinks but stays on the grid, which is kind of what I want. So that I'm not, scaling and it's scaling from the middle and then I push it up and I scale from the middle. That can get old quick. So that's a little trick you can use if you need it. But it looks like this has been pretty trouble-free for me, which is good, but I wanted to give examples of what to do in times of trouble. But it seems like the bumper here is lining up fine. The tire here, when I push the bottommost points onto each other, that lines up pretty well. And a fast check here for the overall windshield. Yeah, that looks pretty good. All right, so I've got the back of the car sorted, and I've got the side mesh done as well. And I'm going to make the other parts of this garage appear. By the way, notice that there is a bit of black whenever you turn these meshes around due to the normal is the side that is drawn. But you can come up here to shading and use X-ray, and suddenly you're able to kind of go to any side and see what you want. If you want to grab the front and then turn it around 180 degrees in Y, so it faces the other way because you're working from this direction, feel free to do so. Instead of -90, it's +90, and then boom, it's now facing me. And it really depends on in what direction you're going to be modeling. So that's the tutorial for setting up your garage. Please make sure to save your work. I was a bit bad here. I did not save a lot of the variations as I was going through this, but you should have at least 4 versions of this because things go wrong all the time, and you do want to quickly go back to work that you've saved. And you've got everything you need in one folder, so that should sort you nicely to start modeling. All right, if you have any questions, let me know. Other than that, let's move on.